Welcome back. So last week we recorded the regular Shark Bites with Rob Allen, and he had some really interesting things to say about changes that are being made at the Governing Council, and I wanted to post those independently. So let's take a look. All right, so the next thing that I want to touch on is, we're talking about the foundation, we're talking about engaging with the ecosystem, but there's also some changes that have taken place at the council level.
Mm.
Can you go over those real quick and let us know what those changes are?
Yes, so I mean that was something I was a lot more involved in than Charles's deliberations, and so what happened again in a similar time frame over the last year, beginning of last year, it became apparent that, and this should always have been obvious, but things in hindsight usually are. Became apparent that there were board directors who were changing jobs and moving away from their governing council employer rather, and therefore becoming unaffiliated. Now, there is no requirement for Hedera board directors to be affiliated. They are ostensibly independent on the board. They're just appointed and allowed from their organizations. But over time, there were seven board directors. Over time, many of them became unaffiliated because they changed jobs, as we all do. So that triggered a discussion about the degree to which board directors should be affiliated with the governing council, and there was a very strong view within the governing council that we had appointed a board to do kind of the day-to-day work of the council. It's very difficult with 39 or however many it was at the time. Large organizations to have a close eye on the operations of the Hedera LLC with all the other network governance responsibilities it has. And at the time and previous to that decision, and I wasn't on the council when that decision was made, but at the time, the board was quite small, and it was formed from Swells Inc. and Mance was on the board, and Brett, and a handful of others who were kind of volunteering. So that was referred to as phase 2 governance. So we had phase 1 governance, which was the original kind of Swells board and what happened immediately after open access. And then phase 2 was this kind of more corporate focused governance, but still, everything was under one roof. Phase 3 became, we spun out the foundation and we start this process of decentralization of the organizations with Swirls Labs formed and the founders moving out, and Mance no longer being on the Hedera board, so we had proper separation. So that's phase 3 governance. And part of phase 3 governance was setting up this board. And you'll remember there was a lot of debate about, the compensation of the board directors. And then the committees were formed as well. So there's this range of committees that were the governing council representatives doing the kind of the heavy lifting. And the deliberations and making recommendations of things like TechCom and CoinCom and CorpCom and GovCom and the others, Marcom and MEMCom, right? So the 6 big committees, each of which had 2 co-chairs and a cast of thousands were the committee layer, and then we had the board layer with the 7 directors. And then we've got the management, so the LC management. That was phase 3 governance. And what this kind of drift towards a board that was majority unaffiliated with the governing council started that conversation about, if the governing council hasn't appointed a board to do the heavy lifting, and compensate it for actually spending a lot of time deliberating and effectively being the executive team for the LLC, which is what it became through phase 3 governance. They spend a lot of time doing those things, not actually operating as a corporate governance board, but actually more of an executive management team. Now we had a president joined who, in normal corporate structures would be managing a team to do most of those things. and the fact that 6 out of 7 ultimately of it was about 5 at one point, I think, but 5 or 6 of the 7 were non-affiliated to the governing council and therefore had no allegiance. They had allegiance to Hedera, non-fiduciary as well, because it was decided that board should not be fiduciary when Hedera was set up, which is a thing that can be done with Delaware incorporated businesses. So there was a legitimate reason to have a discussion about whether phase 3 governance was still fit for purpose, given the fact that all things evolve. We are responsible for self-governance as well as network governance as a governing council. So there was a legitimate conversation to be had about how we should evolve over time and whether that structure is still correct. And so a working group was set up. We always set up working groups for these things. So my heart sank because at that point I thought, oh, this is going to take forever because people are busy, right? And so you have to deliberate. And between May and November, there was a lot of discussion, a lot of toing and froing. There was obvious. We were listening to all sides, and ultimately, and it has been announced this week, or it will be announced in the next couple of days on the Hedera website. It was decided that the board will be reduced in size to 5. There'll be 2 affiliated and 2 non-affiliated, or truly independent directors, and the president. So 5 board members. There is a separation now between the concept of corporate governance and network governance. So the board are focused on corporate governance. So it's almost like any other company board. They're looking at the operations of the LLC, oversight of the president or CEO, and ensuring that the team are delivering to the strategy that the board has agreed and set. And of course, the governing council appoints the board and votes on the strategy. So it does all the network governance that are our responsibilities per the LLC agreement. On the network governance side, it was felt that 6 committees, largely led, as is correct, by the 2 co-chairs. It's actually 2 co-chairs and a director who have been appointed to those committees, plus interested parties from across the governing council. But due to time zones and the ebb and flow of personnel, it was always really those 3 people that were driving each of the committee discussions, agenda. A lot of time was spent juggling, getting votes, and ensuring that the right people were in those discussions. So it was decided that we would formalize that model, how that had become, which means a committee of 3 voting members. All governing council members can attend all of the committee meetings and participate in the discussion and whatever that the objectives of that committee are for the year. But there's only 3 voting members, and there'll be 1 chair who's selected from the 3, and so you've got an odd number, you would get an outcome. And all the committees only make recommendations. So ultimately, the governing council vote on the recommendations from the committees anyway. So the council have the ability to participate in the discussion, to influence the committee members, who then vote and then bring it to the governing council. So it feels a lot more of a slick process. The next thing that we decided was 6 were too many. We were overwhelmed, to be fair, with meetings. And that's not efficient in any organization. It's actually quite natural in enterprise. Over time, there's a natural tendency to bloat, to become less efficient over time. And all good, progressive organizations, are on top of that. And, they need either evolutionary change over time or revolutionary resets if they haven't caught it in time. We were, I think, at the evolutionary end of that scale. So this phase 4 governance now only has 4 committees, and those are TechCom, which is in the same way that we We kind of know and love it. Oversees HIPs, oversees the technical and product roadmap, and prioritization of work. We have MEMCOM, which continues to focus on building the pipeline, onboarding the members, and doing all that good work. We have CoinCom, which continues to be interested in pricing and token economy, etc. So same as usual. And CorpCom has been renamed UseCom. So we are, and I continue to be on that. In 2025, we're going to be expanding our remit. We had been looking at things like ecosystem integrations, what we were talking about earlier as being some of the shortcomings or the things that we're on the back foot of. We've largely improved a lot on that. So ecosystem integrations and enterprise readiness, are all the things that are necessary to build enterprise solutions in place for that enterprise to do that. Project reports, so a corporate utilization oversight. So, what are the use cases running? What's working well? What isn't working so well? Which of the ecosystem partners is better at, doing this or that? If I came as a governing council member or another enterprise to build a big solution, who would I select? And what notes can I learn from other projects? So we kind of curate all of that. And showcasing. We one of our favourite parts of the committee is actually inviting partners or projects in to present what they've done. So that's what we have been doing and what we will continue to do. But we will expand, I think, into metrics. I think there's been a lot of discussion around the metrics that are useful, valuable to know, should be focused upon. Because that's something which drives a lot of our partner work as well. We just discuss things like DeFi metrics, all the great dashboards that you look at with Brady. Those sorts of things could be incorporated into our oversight as well. So those are those four committees. Each of those four committees has three voting members. Each of those committees had one standing co-chair that had another year to serve. And so we ran an election before Christmas. And I'm delighted to say there was a lot of competition for some of those seats. We've got a lot of new faces. I won't go through the list because they're probably on the website as this is being broadcast. But on UseCom, I've got Zhang from Mondelez and Frank from Nairobi Securities Exchange as my co-members. So I'm super pumped to have the massive and very engaged Mondelez lead and the CEO of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, both really, really keen on big use cases. So I couldn't be happier with that. Yeah, and like I said, there's some new faces, which is great because what tends to happen is a governing council member joins, and let's say a new member joins, or there's a new representative due to employee turnover or whatever. It takes them a little while. It can be a bit daunting, a bit overwhelming, sort of landed in this governing council. So it sometimes takes them 6 to 12 months to really find their feet. But this has given them the opportunity. I guess there's 8 new seats and 8 new faces across the committees. At the board level, so we've got a president, so Tom Sylvester in his interim role as president and general counsel. He'll be taking one of those seats. And then Monique Moreau had another year to serve. So it was decided that as the independent remaining board director, that term should be served out. Interestingly, as we know, Duncan Moy left. In fact, he was the last remaining affiliated director who then moved to 21 shares. He put his hand up to take one of the independent director seats. There's a whole election for this. Actually, a handful of the previous directors who were rolling off voted to come back. But he was the one that the council voted for to have the second non-affiliated seat, and then again two amazing candidates from the bunch that were of the council affiliated directors. Bill Miller, who is long-term Hedera fan, representative from Swelds Inc., had been the co-chair on MEMCOM for years, and put his hand up to be one of the board directors, and Frank Wang. So Frank Wang from BitGo was also elected onto the board as an affiliated director. So Frank, as you'll seen, has been very engaged, with both with the council members, but also with interviews and publicly talking about Hedera. So I think we've got an excellent board. I'm really excited about that board. The board self-select their chair, and they've selected Bill Miller. I mean, he's a grandee of the ecosystem. I think he's a perfect selection to be board chair. So I'm really, really excited about this new setup. The last remaining role is the council chair role. Now, so what had happened over time was that Brett McDowell was originally, during these phases of governance, phase 1, 2, 3, and now we're in phase 4, had kind of been brought on board to run the council under phase 1, and then had evolved into a kind of combined multi-hatted president, board chair, and council chair. And then obviously we employed Charles to take the president role. And now we've split the corporate governance from the network governance. We've also split that chair role. So Bill Miller is now chair, as I've just said, of the board, which leaves the council chair role. So Brett is going to stay in that. We've asked him to stay on in an interim term. So that's the next 6 months, or this 6 months. And there'll be an election during that time for a chair for the council, which is an important role that kind of coordinates, not only runs the meetings, but coordinates the governing council. So that's the last remaining piece. Sorry, that was a very long answer, but I'm
That's
quite
all right.
I'm quite passionate about getting governance right, and I think we've done a pretty good job at kind of reorging and resetting, being fit for purpose. All the compensations changed, come down significantly, and which is again very right. Let's see how we go. It won't be the last change. I think in 2 or 3 years, we're probably talking about phase 5 governance or whatever. But it's it was an interesting period. Obviously, all in the background. We can't talk about any of that until it's been made public. But now it's public. It's something that it's important. I think that the community knows that. The governing council is very engaged. It knows what good looks like, and especially when it's in your title, being the governing council. Although I think we're being rebranded under this general rebrand as the Hedera Council, but our role continues to be governance of the network.